Every Friday, without fail, an elderly woman would quietly leave a box of cookies on the steps of the post office. No one ever questioned her reasons. No one offered thanks. The clerk barely gave her a nod anymore. Yet she carried on week after week, year after year, through storms, through sorrow, through seasons of personal loss. Then one autumn morning, the earth gave a low rumble. A Black Hawk helicopter descended straight into her backyard. A soldier stepped out clutching a worn silver card, his face streaked with tears. What kind of woman could compel a military unit to land in her yard just to repay a forgotten kindness? This is Uncovered Tales, and today we're digging into the heart of that question. Clara Jensen's hands weren't as steady as they used to be. But even at 71, she could still shape cookie dough with the kind of care that had made her legendary in Oakage, Iowa. Her little kitchen smelled of warm vanilla and cinnamon, the morning light falling through faded gingham curtains she'd sewn back when her son was still a boy. She had been alone for 15 years, ever since cancer took her husband, James. Clara still lived in the humble two-bedroom house where they'd raised their only child, also named James. His photos still adorned the walls, from gap-toothed school pictures to the proud, upright image of him in his marine dress blues. Like his father, James had chosen a military path. He served with honor until 2007, when a roadside bomb in Afghanistan claimed his life at just 23. After 4 decades teaching second grade at Oakage Elementary, Clara had retired quietly. Her pension was modest but sufficient. It allowed her to donate regularly to church and spend Wednesday afternoons volunteering at Sunny Pines Retirement Home. But in Oakage, she was known best not for her teaching, but for her baking. 11 straight county fair blue ribbons for her pies. Her Christmas cookies? Local legend. Then, on a cold evening in 2015, Clara sat alone watching the nightly news. A segment showed American soldiers stationed in Syria, young faces in dusty gear, blinking into the desert sun. One of them, hardly older than her son had been, looked into the camera and shyly said he missed his mom's chocolate chip cookies. Clara's eyes welled with tears. Her tea sat untouched, cooling on the table beside her. That soldier's face, the brave but homesick smile, was a mirror of James during his final video call home. The next morning, Clara woke with renewed purpose. By noon, she had baked 24 chocolate chip cookies and a dozen snickerdoodles, carefully tucked into a wax paper-lined tin. She added a simple note for someone far away from home: "Stay safe. Clara C." At the post office, she asked the clerk where she could send the package. Somewhat surprised, he gave her the address for Fort Dixon, roughly 40 miles away. Clara didn't hesitate. She paid the postage, knowing her pension would have to stretch a little thinner that month. No one responded. No thank you ever came. But the next Friday, Clara showed up with another tin of cookies. And a new note. And so it began. Week after week, she returned with more, sometimes 1 tin, then 2, then eventually 3. She never mentioned her son directly, but each box bore a small inscription. For those serving in silence. From a mother who once waited for her son. Not everyone understood her commitment. Her longtime neighbor, Doris Fletcher, leaned over the garden fence one day, watching Clara load her Buick with fresh tins. "You really think they even eat all those cookies?" Doris asked skeptically. "Seems like a waste of flour and sugar if you ask me." Even Kelly Simmons, the postal clerk who had once sat in Clara's second-grade classroom, would flash a sympathetic smile as she scanned the packages. "No one's written back yet, huh, Mrs. Jensen? People just don't show appreciation like they used to." Clara only smiled. "I'm not doing it for the thanks, Kelly." As the months turned to years, her ritual became a fixture, steady and dependable as Sunday service bells. Not once did she miss a Friday. Not in 2017, when a blizzard buried her car under 3 feet of snow. Not during her 2019 bout of pneumonia, when she baked while seated on a stool. Not even in 2020, when the pandemic shut everything down and the post office cut its hours. 8 years passed. 416 Fridays. 416 quiet offerings of love sent to strangers, each of them wearing the same uniform her son had worn the day he died. The gentle souls often bear the heaviest burdens, Clara told her cat, Sergeant, while tying a ribbon around another cookie tin. But sometimes, kindness is just the only way they know how to live. Stay with us to see where Clara's story leads next. In the 8th year of her cookie mission, Clara had a rough Thursday night. Her arthritis flared badly, swelling her fingers and making it difficult to grip a pen. The note she was writing smudged when the pen slipped. Too exhausted to start over, she added a small postscript. "My son loved these before he fell in Afghanistan." That box ended up traveling farther than most. It changed hands through a chain of military mailrooms until it landed at Forward Operating Base Horizon in northern Iraq, where Captain Eric Lawson was on his third deployment. That day had been one of the worst of his career. A mission had gone sideways, not disastrously, but badly enough to shake his confidence as a leader. When the mail came, he nearly ignored the dented cookie tin among the official documents. But something, maybe the familiar handwriting, prompted him to open it first. The cookies were slightly crumbled from the journey but still good. What stopped him cold was the note. "My son loved these before he fell in Afghanistan." Lawson set the tin aside, his hands suddenly trembling. 8 years earlier, fresh out of officer training, he had served with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines in Afghanistan, the same unit listed on the return address label. He scrambled through his phone and pulled up an old unit photo. There he was, third row off to the left, Lance Corporal James Jensen. The memories hit like a punch, the patrol, the blast, the chaotic medevac that hadn't come in time. James had saved 2 others that day. He'd spotted the IED and shouted a warning just in time. As they waited for help, barely conscious, James had spoken about his mother's cookies and his promise to bring some back for the whole unit. That night, Captain Lawson sat alone in his quarters, the open tin beside him. He wondered how many of Clara Jensen's cookies he might have eaten without realizing, wondered if she knew her son had died a hero, wondered whether anyone had ever told her that his actions had spared other mothers the grief she had carried alone. Back in Oakage, Clara's quiet mission had drawn unwanted attention. A local blogger posted an article titled "Iowa Woman Self-Appoints as Soldier's Mom," accusing her of chasing publicity. The writer hadn't even spoken to Clara but labeled her efforts as performative patriotism intended to attract media coverage. The piece started making rounds. She first sensed the shift when Hammers Hardware, where she'd shopped for baking supplies for years, suddenly claimed they were out of vanilla extract. "Maybe try online," the owner's son said with a shrug. "We're trying to stay out of anything political." "Political?" Clara repeated, visibly puzzled. "It's just vanilla, Todd." Even at church, where she'd taught Sunday school for 3 decades, people seemed more distant. No one brought up her cookie deliveries during prayer requests anymore. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Her grandniece Sophie, visiting from college, picked up on it right away. "Isn't anyone backing your cookie project anymore, Aunt Clara?" she asked over Sunday dinner. Clara slowly sliced into her roast beef before replying. "People have their own worries these days. Doesn't that bother you, after all you've done?" Clara gave a quiet smile, tinged with sorrow rather than anger. "No, honey. I'm not upset. If someone out there still remembers James, that's more than enough for me." That Tuesday, Clara found an envelope in her mailbox, plain, unmarked, and unexpected. Inside was a short handwritten letter. "Mrs. Jensen, I served with your son in Afghanistan. Your cookies kept me alive last week, during a moment when I nearly made a choice no soldier should have to face. Just knowing someone out there still cares enough to bake for people like me gave me the strength to ask for help. Please don't stop." Tucked into the envelope was something Clara recognized instantly, a worn Marine Corps insignia, James's. She had long assumed it was lost along with the rest of his belongings. Pressing it to her chest, Clara wept quietly, telling no one. She simply placed the emblem in James's memory box and went back to baking. As winter neared, the local blog post that had once questioned her motives surfaced again, this time paired with a video. Someone had secretly recorded Clara at the post office, capturing her carefully arranging her packages. A male voice could be heard heckling her in the background. "Hey, old lady. When are you going to figure out nobody gives a damn about your cookies?" In the footage, Clara kept her composure, but the tremble in her hands betrayed the hurt. The video circulated quickly, at least in her small town, sparking a wave of cruel remarks from people who had no idea who James was or what Clara had carried quietly for 8 years. None of them knew about the letter hidden inside her Bible, the one that proved at least one soldier had been pulled back from the edge by her kindness. Still, every Friday, without exception, Clara carried on, mixing dough, baking trays of cookies, tying ribbons, and delivering each package as if it were her first. Seasons came and went, but her ritual stayed the same. Her doctor eventually raised concerns. "Mrs. Jensen, with your age and your arthritis, this weekly baking spree is wearing you down." Clara had just smiled gently. "Some things are worth a little pain, doctor." Each batch of cookies carried more than just sugar and flour. They held memories, rainy afternoons when young James helped her roll dough, teenage years when he'd sneak spoonfuls of batter, and his last visit home when they perfected a snickerdoodle recipe together. Every ribbon she tied was more than decoration, it was her way of holding onto the love that hadn't faded even in the face of loss. As long as there are troops far from home, she told Sergeant the Cat while packing another tin, someone should remind them they're not forgotten. If you believe small acts of love still make a difference, drop a hop in the comments. Share a moment when one gesture, no matter how small, it changed everything. On one especially bitter Friday in November, Clara woke with pain radiating through her joints. The arthritis had intensified and snow was expected by noon. Still, she pulled herself out of bed at her usual 5 a.m., determined to keep her promise. By mid-morning, the cookies were baked, but she struggled to carry the tins to her car. One of the boxes slipped from her grip and hit the floor. Cookies scattered across the linoleum like fallen memories. Clara dropped into a chair, exhausted and defeated. For the first time in nearly a decade, the thought crossed her mind, maybe she'd skip this Friday. Her grandniece Sophie, who was staying with her during college break, found Clara sitting amid the broken cookies, silent tears streaming down her face. "Aunt Clara, maybe it's time to rest," Sophie said softly, kneeling beside her. "You've done more than anyone could ask. No one would think less of you." Clara wiped her face with a flowery sleeve and replied, her voice calm but resolute. "Once a week. That's what gets me out of bed." Those simple words pierced Sophie's heart. She helped her great-aunt clean up the mess and insisted on driving her to the post office. Across town, opinions about Clara had shifted. Some whispered that she was just clinging to grief, chasing shadows. Others believed she was hungry for attention. Few truly understood what drove her, the steady heartbeat of private grief and unshakable love. The next Thursday, Clara once again began her baking ritual. This time, Sophie stayed close to assist with packaging the tins. That night, Clara barely slept. Her dreams were filled with James's laughter and the ghostly sound of helicopter blades. Friday morning dawned cold and bright. Clara was sipping tea when she heard a low rumble that made her china cabinet tremble. The sound deepened into a rhythmic beat that rattled the windows. "Aunt Clara!" Sophie shouted from upstairs. "Something's going on out back." Clara shuffled to the rear porch just in time to see a massive Black Hawk helicopter descending into her modest backyard. Its rotor wash sent leaves flying and bent the old apple tree nearly sideways. Neighbors poured out of their homes, many still in pajamas, eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Fletcher stood at her garden fence, her jaw slack. A few houses down, someone was already live-streaming the event on their phone. As the helicopter's blades slowed, 6 soldiers in full dress uniforms stepped out with precision. Their medals caught the sunlight as they moved into formation. At the front stood a captain, holding a wooden plaque. Clara stood frozen on the steps as the officer approached and offered a sharp salute. "Mrs. Clara Jensen?" he asked, though it was clear he already knew. Clara nodded, clutching her cardigan closed against the cold air stirred by the landing. "I'm Captain Eric Lawson," he said. "I served with your son's unit. I was the last man in his squad to make it home." The words hit Clara like a punch to the chest. After 15 years of silence and stiff condolence letters, here stood someone who had been there, someone who had known James during his final days. Captain Lawson continued, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "Ma'am, you began sending cookies to troops 8 years ago. What you couldn't have known is that many of those packages made it to your son's old unit." He paused for a moment, emotion creeping into his voice. "Last year, I received one myself, with a note smudged by shaky hands. It mentioned James by name. That's when I realized who you were, and what you'd been doing all this time." Clara's knees gave slightly, and Sophie reached out to steady her. Then came the part that left even the spectators breathless. "Before he died," Lawson said, "your son talked about you. He told us you baked cookies for his little league team after every single game. Win or lose, he said, there was always a warm batch waiting. And he promised us, swore, that when he came home, he'd bring your cookies for all of us." The captain's voice cracked. "Mrs. Jensen, you kept his promise. Without ever knowing it, you made sure he kept his word." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who had once doubted her now stood stunned. Even Doris Fletcher brought a trembling hand to her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. And so it goes on quietly day after day, unaffected by applause or attention. I often wonder how many Claras quietly walk among us. Ordinary people making extraordinary choices, not for show, but because it's simply who they are. Often, it takes a moment of drama for us to recognize what's been quietly present all along. A retired teacher offering free tutoring to students who've fallen behind. A neighbor clearing snow before sunrise so others don't slip on their way to work. An anonymous donor keeping a shelter's lights on through the coldest nights. A hospice volunteer sitting silently beside the dying when there's no one else left to do so. I see every comment you leave. And I know many of you have been someone's Clara Jensen. You've chosen the right path even when it was hard. You've given freely without being asked or thanked. You've kept going long after others stopped showing up. We're not in this for plaques or public praise. We're here because we still believe doing good creates ripples even if we never witness the waves. Just like Clara's cookies, which found their way into distant lands and broken moments, comforting strangers she might never meet, your kindness also travels farther than you realize. There are people who do good in silence. People whose names are never trending. People who serve without expecting recognition or reward. And sometimes there are cookies baked not for applause, but for peace. For remembrance. For connection. Maybe that's what this story asks of us. What are the cookies we're baking? What quiet kindness can we offer the world again and again? What promise are we carrying forward for someone who can't finish what they started? Clara's story isn't just a tribute to a devoted mother or a grateful Marine. It's a testament to what happens when someone chooses to stay committed to kindness through heartbreak, through doubt, through time. And eventually, that consistency, however quiet, gets heard. So if you still believe that heroes aren't always famous, that some wear aprons, not uniforms, and that the smallest gestures can leave the biggest marks, then help us continue sharing their stories. Subscribe to Uncovered Tales, where the quietly brave are never forgotten.